Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about is that we had a chat with Steve and we decided collectively that it's best if you make your animatics only in 3D, simply because this will give you a lot of indication as to what you have to do for your as the time comes for the next and the next and the next steps of your project. So definitely keep that in mind, that your animatics must be in 3D. And today's lesson is going to be mainly about that process. How can we make it? I know Steve talked to you about the principles of it. Today I'm going to show you how we do those in Maya actually. So that's going to be most of what we're going to be talking about. So in doing that, I want to do this process. Let's go ahead and say I have a folder in here. I'm going to make this folder called My Final Project. This is the folder I'm assuming that you put in your Google Drive folder or your Dropbox folder, or some sort of a way that is shared between you and your teammates. So you all point to this very same folder. So the content of it is shared. I can't, I can't express this enough, that this is very important to make sure that you all work on the same project. So there are not two different copies of anything. Everyone is working with the same set of settings and the same set of files and so on and so forth. So within my final project, obviously I need to have my Maya project. So I'm going to go to Maya. In Maya, I'm going to say File, and then here I'm going to say Project Window. This is going to be on my desktop, my final project, and here is going to be called Maya project. So that's going to be my Maya project. Remember, Maya makes a lot of random folders, so if you don't really need them, you can actually eliminate them. The ones that you need are the scenes, images, source images, and that's pretty much all that you need there. You could keep render data as well, but everything else you can just put them in one other folder called, for instance, data. This way it makes sure that your project isn't very crowded. You don't have so many different folders in there. I will show you that in a second. Yes. Record there. I do record the lab every week and I do post the labs. Do you guys not get them? Okay, let me just make sure of that then. Yes, like for instance on week 8 there is the Maya animation for section 1 and section 2. I can see them. On week 7 there is IK human IK lab 102 and 101. On week 6 the same thing, so on and so forth. And I'm recording this session right now and I will post it on week 9 right after the stuff that Steve has posted. So the short answer is yes, I will. Of course I am recording and you will get them. So of course, don't worry about it. So you make sure that you clear this and you say accept. The advantage of this is this: when you go to your Maya project, now there's only a handful of folders. There isn't like hundreds of folders, so they don't really confuse you. Again and again, keep in mind, scenes is the folder you absolutely need. That is where you actually put your actual scenes. Source images are your references and images and textures. Images are your final rendered images. My workspace.maya embedded language or .mel is basically how your structure of Maya project is created. And these other ones, you may or may not need them. So that's what I will do as a very first step. Now, to go back to Maya in here, now we are within this new project, and let's say the very first thing that I want to be doing is I actually want to make myself a bunch of shots. So let's go in here for my animatics, of course. I'm going to say here is my situation. I have a video that for my video I have shot 1 and I have shot 2 and I have shot 3. All right, so shot 1 is meant to be character establishment, for instance, establishing shot. So let's say the character enters. All right, so you will have a longer and a better description of what happens in the shot, but for me I'm just saying shot 1 establishing character enters. Right, then I have shot 2 where the character walks towards the window. So I'm gonna say window, character walks towards the window. For whatever reason, this is a description that you have for your different shots, that in each shot something is basically happening. And then shot 3, let's say confusion. All right, this is where a character looks confused because something has happened. I don't exactly know what has happened. So on and so forth. You have broken down your story into many shots, right? Is this part of it clear to everyone? I want to make sure that everyone knows why we have so many different shots and why do we think about it in that sense. Is there anyone who doesn't know this or is still unsure as to how we do it or why we do it? Okay, so I take it that we're all familiar with this process. The reason I keep emphasizing on it is that this is actually a very complex process. And, a lot of us, we might think that we know how we do it, including myself, but the actual shot breakdown is difficult because you have a storyline and then making that shot by shot is actually an experience-based, processes that you need to have done it many times. So next time you can decide when my first shot begins and when my second shot begins, so on and so forth. But in any case, let's say you have broken your shot into your video into so many different shots, and now you want to make all of these into your 3D animatics. Now to create that, let's say I want to have my character and I want to have my environment. By the looks of it, the environment, and of course you will have a written description of this, but the environment looks like to be like a room, like an indoor environment. So I'm going to go to Maya. In Maya, I'm going to say, let's go ahead to general content browsers. In here, let's bring a character. The reason I'm bringing this character is simply for the matters of measurement. I want to know how big or how small things should be. That's the only reason I have this. Otherwise, it doesn't matter whatsoever. So here I have this, and I'm going to assume I want to put this character in the middle of a room. So I'm going to go in here, say, let's build this room. Let's say that is the floor of it, for instance. Let me find out what are my measurements like. So my measurements are like, centimeters. So let's say 800 by 20 by 1000. So that's basically the basics of my measurement. Then I'm going to go ahead and change the pivot of it, put it somewhere on the top. Again, none of these things are things that you must absolutely follow my approach for it. I feel like it helps if we get a sense of what we are doing, but then again, you don't really have to do it exactly in this or any other approach, basically. So here I'm just gonna quickly build some environment for myself. So here I'm gonna put that guy there. Let's say instead of an 8 is 250, it's or 300, maybe a ceiling for a room. Let's duplicate this. Let's put it here. So this is my other wall in here, for instance. I'm gonna duplicate it. I'm gonna rotate it to this much. All right, and I'm gonna put it here. So that's too tall. Obviously, I have to make it 800. So that becomes there. Let's say I want to make myself another room on this another wall on this other side of this room. Let's say about here. All right, so I've gotten that part taken care of. So we have some sort of an environment. Let me push this higher so it matches the other ones. So this is good. I want to actually cut this down, so I make a little bit of a door for it, simply because it says the character enters. So here I'm gonna actually scale this down to be like that. Then I'm gonna duplicate it. I'm gonna put it in this side, for instance. If I can, that would be good. One more time here. All right, so that's about the door that I wanted to create. And then I'm going to duplicate this one, and again, it's up to you how you decide about these earlier stages, but eventually you have to have everything in a working condition and with the right fidelity, and all the objects to have their own actual quality. So this is going to be my little environment, and that is my character. This is what I wanted to get to have this environment. Now when I have this environment and I'm going to use this in several different shots, I'm actually going to make a scene separately for this environment. So to do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and delete my character. I'm going to say this is my environment. For the most part, let's say my environment is colored like this. They're all pretty, you know, bright, let's say, in here. Then I'm gonna say my ceiling, for whatever reason, is actually a little bit bluish. It's color like that one. So when we go inside, we can see that. And then I'm gonna say my floor, for instance, is going to be a color like this. Let's say a darker version like that one. And then I'm gonna just color one of my sides to be an entirely different color, say a yellow, for instance. Now I've gotten this environment, and what does matter to me is this. I want to put everything within a file that I can reference whenever I need. So I'm going to go ahead to my outliner. I'm going to group everything together, and I'm going to call it my room, for instance. And now I'm going to save this scene within my scenes folder. I'm going to call it environment. So this is the environment, or the room environment of my project, because you might have many different environments in the same scene. Now, what we're going to do next is we're actually going to use this environment as a file that has been referenced in other files. So for instance, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say, let's make shot one. Shot one is the establishing, and let's say we assumed, based on some voiceover or some description that we have, that it is going to be about 3 seconds, or what we actually call 75 frames, right? Let's say that is for my shot one. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to go to the settings. I'm going to say the settings is 25 frames per second. We're going to play it in real time, 25 FPS by 1. And I'm going to say it has to be 75 frames for shot one. So that is 75 frames for shot one. And then in this shot one, here's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to say create a reference. And what am I referencing? I'm referencing the room environment. So basically what has happened is that Maya has copied a version or imported a version of my room environment to this scene, the scene that is meant to be shot one, basically. So what I'm going to do in here is this. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's save this, and I'm going to call it shot one establishing. So this is the shot one. And then within this shot one, we have a version of that environment. And I can see that because if I go to the reference editor, it actually shows me that room environment has been entered or imported to this scene. But we don't really just need the room environment. What we do actually need is our character, and we want to see this thing, character entering. So if you want to see the character entering, let's go ahead and enter the or import the character. I'm going to say this is a version of my character. Obviously, you need to have your actual character, the character that you have been working on modeling or whatever. I'm going to say at the beginning is, for instance, in here. I'm going to have S for a keyframe. Then I'm going to say it was supposed to be what, 75 frames, right? 75. I'm going to say up until, for instance, here 75, the character will reach this position. So that's basically the character entering the room. So that's basically the animation of it. Now the next thing I need to decide is I need to decide about the camera angle. How does this character basically look like from the camera that's going to render this shot? So to do that, I'm going to go to create cameras. I'm going to build myself a simple camera without aim and up. And I'm going to say this is the camera. And then if you want to actually look through your camera, you go to the panels and you say look through selected, which basically says look from the perspective of this currently selected object, most notably spotlights and cameras in my case. So I'm going to look through this. I'm going to say let's go to this corner, for instance. So here is where I want to be. And then the one thing that you can do is you can actually split your screen into two. So one of them becomes your camera, such as this one, and then the other one becomes your perspective. So in this one, I'm actually going to go to perspective, or this one becomes my camera, and this is my perspective. And then what I could do, for instance, I could actually go to the outliner. select my camera, and then change, for instance, the lens of it. Let's say 20 millimeters, so I can see more of the environment, like this one. So I can actually see more of what's going on. So for whatever reason, this is my establishing shot. This is what I want to be seeing when the shot begins. So the character enters the scene. So we have already taken care of one of our shots. So here, this one is done, establishing. Then the next one is the shot about the window, right? So let's go ahead and save this one. And then what I'm also going to do is this. I'm actually going to go ahead, copy this name, shot 2, and I'm going to go in here and say File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to say in this one, I want to save it as the second one, shot 2. So we have two shots that right now they look exactly the same, but obviously we're going to change them. So let's say in the second shot, my character isn't moving from there. My character is actually, let's delete all of these things. Let's delete all the keyframes. So my character is actually standing in here, and we're gonna assume there will be a window in here. Guys, there's a siren going off in here. I'm gonna mute my stuff for a second. All right, almost gone. Okay, so we're gonna assume that the character is basically standing in front of a window and looking outside. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and say this is, for instance, going to be my camera angle, and maybe in this shot we are actually going to animate the camera, for instance. So I'm gonna go ahead and saying character walks towards the window, and let's say it is approximately, I don't know, 4 seconds. All right, which is almost 100 frames. So I'm going to come in here, say this shot has to be 100 frames, and what we want to be seeing in it is this. We want to see the character actually walking towards this window. So the character is about here, and then what's going to happen for it is that at the very beginning there is a keyframe for it, then later on at frame 100 there's going to be another keyframe where the character has reached the window. So that's basically what's happening for it, and I'm going to look through my camera, which basically sees this event happening, the character going towards the window, or the window that we have to build in there. It's not there just yet. Now the next thing I want to be doing is actually want to animate my camera as well. So I'm going to go to window, I'm going to go to the outliner, select my camera. This is camera 1. If we look at it from the perspective, we can actually see it in here. That is the shape of the camera, which is currently just there. It hasn't been animated or anything. So what I can do is I can actually go to a 2-view perspective, and in one of them I can look through the camera, and in this one I can see my perspective, so I can decide about what kind of animation I want to see for it. Let me make it a little bit larger so I can see it easier. Then I'm gonna say at the very beginning, I'm gonna say this is going to be the situation. My camera is going to be here. I'm gonna make a keyframe in here, key selected, and then I'm gonna go further in time, and then further in time the camera is going to move forward as well. So this is another key in here. So if we play the animation now, it looks like this. Both the character and the camera are moving towards the window. Now here is where that power of referencing comes into play. As we were going through the animation, we realized up here we need a window, and because these are referenced within each other, we can actually go to the scene that is just the environment and change that. So I'm going to go to the environment scene, room environment. And the room environment, I'm going to go ahead into here. Remember, this is the one that doesn't have any characters or anything. It's just the environment. And in this room environment, I'm going to say, well, we need to have a little window. So how about we do this? So that basically builds up a parts of the room. Then I'm going to duplicate this, push this higher, move it up there, so that builds the basically the other part of the window for me. And then I have to actually build a little bit more. So to do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and make this a smaller, for instance, like that. And you could use any of the different methods for yourself. I'm actually going to opt for this one, but again, it doesn't matter which one you do, because this is more of a crude version of how we do things. For a final version, obviously you actually have to have a proper modeling and everything taken care of. So here we just changed some stuff, so now our room actually does have a little window, and I'm going to save this scene, and the moment I save it, it automatically gets repurposed in those other scenes as well. So if I go back to shot 2 window, we will see that now we have that over there, and if we go to shot 1, we will see that that very same scene has been imported in here, which also means that, you know, we see the window in here as well. Now I'm going to go back to shot 2 just to make sure that things are happening nice and clean and the way I was hoping they would. So let's run the animation again. Yes, my character is actually moving towards the window, which is great. And then I'm going to go to this shot, shot 3, confusion. Let's say this one is meant to be just 2 seconds. All right, this is where we're going to see the face of our character that is, you know, confused for whatever reason. So I'm going to say shot 3, confusion. So let's go ahead and save this scene for whatever it is. Then I'm going to save this scene as, and I'm going to say this is shot 3, confusion. So I have 3 shots now, and this last one is very similar, identical to the second one, so I have to actually fix that. To fix that, I'm going to go ahead and say select the camera. The camera doesn't have to have any keyframes, so I'm going to select all of these keyframes and say delete selected. So there are no keyframes. I actually want to look at my character from this angle because I want to see their face. Also, the character is meant to be very close to the window by now, so I'm going to actually push it further to about here, and I'm going to delete these keyframes. So let's go ahead and say in my last shot, which is meant to be 2 frames or 50 frames, the camera basically pulls up and sees the face of my character. So basically, let's say my camera is going to be here at the very end, right? So here at the very end, I'm going to make a keyframe for all of these, translation and rotation, and then at the very beginning is going to be here, for instance, just seeing the ledge of the window. So again, another keyframe. So let's see. This is going to be my third shot. So far we have made shots 1, 2, 3, and these 3 shots are basically are there for us to be used as animatics. Now the next thing we want to be doing is we basically want to make a video out of these 3 shots, take them to a video editing software such as Adobe Premiere or if you use Final Cut Pro or any similar tools, and we want to put these shots together so they become one continuous motion that they tell the story of what we are trying to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I'm going to go ahead and have a look at my 3 shots. So this is shot 3. Let me open shot 1. So this is shot 1. They all use the same environment. So here they all use the same environment, and now I want to actually, you know, record this one. I want to make a play blast for it. Remember that before we make a play blast, we make sure that we know what kind of rendering we are causing. Is HD 540? Let's say I want to render at HD 720 or whatever version that you feel. HD 720 or HD 1080 are best ones, at least in this current times. But whatever number you choose, that has to be the same for all of my shots. So I'm going to say HD 720, and then here I'm going to go to the play blast, and in the play blast I'm going to go ahead and say from the render settings, and it's going to be called shot 1 establishing, and then you could put it either in the data folder or in the images folder, wherever you find more appropriate. I'm going to say make a play blast of this shot. It's going to take a little while, and then it has made me a video that is basically showing this thing coming through. The video also is here. If I go to my project, so in my final project, in Maya project, within the Maya project we have images, and now there is an MOV file, a video file that shows this shot. Now let's go back to Maya. I'm going to open the next shot, that is shot 2. And I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember what size I gave to the first shot. I gave it HD 720. And this is a one-time setup. Once you set it up, it's always going to be there. So you don't need to constantly change it each time that you come in here. So that's going to be HD 720. This is my animation. And what I want to be doing, I want to say play blast. This is the name. I want to put it in the images folder. So that is the name, and I want to say play blasted. It takes a little bit more while, and then the character shows that it actually moved from there to there. I'm not going to show you the file because it's definitely there. And then finally we're going to go to shot 3, which is the close-up of the confusion of the face of the character. Again, I'm going to double check to make sure that the settings are right, which basically means it is HD 720 in this case. Then I'm going to go to the play blast. In the play blast, I'm going to say take it from the render settings. It is called shot 3 confusion. Put it in the images, such as this one. Save and hit play blast. It takes a little while, and it renders that one as well. So what we have by now is this. We have shots 1, shot 2, and then shot 3. And the advantage of this system is that by now within Maya I've gotten 3 shots that each of them has the right duration, all the right settings, frames per second, the render settings and everything. More importantly, or most importantly, it has the right dimensions. So I kind of have gotten to know the physical dimension of my objects. This is how big the walls or the room or whatever has to be. Because I have the right system of having referencing, I have the environment as a separate file, and I can make changes to it that they will appear in here as well. And I will show you that in a second. But before doing that, let's go ahead and edit these shots together. So to do the editing, I'm actually going to go to Premiere in my case. If you don't use Premiere, I'm guessing you all are familiar with some sort of video editing software, either Adobe Premiere or Apple Final Cut Pro or Avid, whatever tools it is called, the editing software there. In any case, you go to Premiere, and here I'm going to make myself a new project. Let's go in here. Now my new project, again, I want it to be in this folder, my final project, but not within the Maya project, obviously. So I'm going to call this one video edits. Remember, this main folder, my final project, is in somewhere that is shared between you and your colleagues. So here I'm going to say video edit, for instance, or the name of your film edit, right? So in here I'm going to go ahead and say let's import everything that we have. So from my final project, Maya project, images, all 3 of these guys. And I'm going to say this is shot 1. After the shot 1, we get shot 2, and then we get shot 3, for instance. And now if we actually run this animation, we can see that the character enters. Once it enters, we follow them to the edge of the window, and then we see this time that we come to their face and we see them that they are a little bit confused. Now let's say as I was creating this, I realized this last shot is actually not the way it's meant to be, because I kind of wanted to go quickly to their face and then pause there and actually see their confusion on their face. So I'm going to go back to Maya. In Maya, I'm going to say, let's open the last shot. That is going to be shot 3 confusion, right? And in here, I'm going to say, well, this camera animation, I don't like it. So let's select this camera animation. You can either edit them or just delete them and restart them, whichever way works for you. I'm going to say here, I have 1 keyframe. Then I go further up in about 30, frame 30. Then I get to, let's say here, so I'm going to make another keyframe, and then at the frame 50 I'm going to go further and closer to the face, say there. So this is my new animation. All right, I have to fix the keyframes because they don't really work well, so I'm actually going to go to Window, Animation, Graph Editor. I'm going to find the keyframe that is actually causing that. I think this is the one, so it actually has to be like that. All right, let's see if this is better. All right, a little bit better. Let's see other keyframes. That is all right. That is causing some more issues as well. So like that. There is no rotation, and obviously there are no scale. So I usually delete all the keyframes that I know I don't need, so that makes my life a little bit easier. So let's say this was the sequence that we actually cared about. So I'm going to go in here, say play blast. And I'm going to overwrite it over the same file that I had before. So here, I'm going to go to the images, overwrite it on top of the 3rd one. It says, do you want to replace it? Yes, I know what I'm doing. And now, if we go back to Adobe Premiere, everything obviously makes sense now. Now the new shot is going to be there, and we can see it all the way there, which really helps us, understand how we are doing our editing, and we can just replace one shot at a time. Now I'm going to do another thing. I'm actually going to go ahead and close this project, the Premiere project. I'm going to go back to Maya, and I'm going to think that I am the guy who is in charge of the environment. So I'm going to go to the environment, the room environment. Whether that is you or someone else is irrelevant. You do this separation so you know what you're working on and what's happening, right? So I'm going to go in here in my environment shot. The environment scene is the one that's being shared by everyone else, right? So here in the environment one, I'm going to assume that there is going to be some sort of a desk or something in here. So here, let's go ahead, and I'm going to hide this momentarily. Say down in here, I want to add a desk. So I'm going to say this is a larger piece like that. I'm gonna move it right on the surface in here, for instance. Make it not like that, make it larger like that. I'm gonna put it in here. I'm also gonna assume that there's going to be some painting hanging from this wall. So for instance, I could make one of these and push it to somewhere like there, make it a lot larger, rotate it like this. All right, these are all placeholders. You put the actual objects later on, right? So this placeholder, I'm going to say, is going to have a shader of its own, that the shader of it is actually pitch blue, because that's going to be the painting on it, for instance. And this one is going to be some sort of a brown color, because it is some sort of a desk made of wood, for instance. So for whatever reason, my designer, or if that's myself, we have decided that we're going to make these changes to our design. Also, maybe we add a little bit of lighting to our scene. So let's say I'm going to come in here and add a few point lights. So let's say I have this light, which I can see the result of it in here. All right, so like that. And I have another one which is in here, and then another one at the very far end. Let's say all three of these. I'm gonna move them, put them there, and then duplicate them and put them in here. All of them together, they make for a very, very bright scene, which is not really a good thing. So I'm gonna actually select all my point lights, and I'm gonna say they are all dimmer. So let's say 0.3 or 0.2. All right, so they basically make up the lighting for my environment. Maybe this shader is too bright as well, like that. So in any case, we have actually done some more work on our scene. Now our scene has a little bit more details, the environment scene. I'm gonna save that. When I save that and go back to shot one, for instance, what is going to happen is obviously very evident that now we have actually the result of those changes. We have this desk in here, we have this painting, and we have all the lighting in our scene. And what I want to be doing now is I actually want to replace the preview that we have created. So I'm going to say again up here, play blast. The play blast is going to have the same name, and it's going to override the previous one. So establishing shot gets overridden. Play blast. It takes a little while for it to create this one. Once that is done, I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to go back to Maya, go to shot 2. Shot 2 is going to be exactly the same thing. The environment is going to be replaced by the new one. So we have the new lighting and the new objects and everything. This time when we start, we're actually right next to the desk. So that's actually something interesting. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and make a play blast again. This play blast, let's go ahead and say exactly that's just like the last time. It's going to overwrite the shot 2 play blast, and that is going to be there. And then I'm going to go ahead to Maya and go to my shot 3. So in my shot 3, very similar situation is happening again. In the shot 3, what I have is I'm going to go in here, and that is the scene that we have. Maybe the lighting doesn't work for this one. Maybe we have to change the lighting a little bit in here. I'm actually going to do that before I do the play blast. So maybe for this shot alone, we actually have to introduce one more light, or a light specific to this character for whatever reason. So I'm going to actually put a light in here, add it there, go back to my camera. So when I look at it, it actually makes sense, something like this one. So that is my latest version of everything. So here I'm gonna say play blast. Same thing as before. The only thing I keep in mind is that every time I overwrite everything, so in my editor, such as Adobe Premiere, everything is going to work. I feel like I rendered with the wrong resolution. Let me make sure I changed that or not. No, it isn't HD 540, it has to be HD 720. So let me redo that one more time. So here, confusion, save, overwrite, yes, replace, and play blast. And it takes a little while, and now it is built there. Now, we have made these 3 shots. So we had them before, we updated them basically with the most recent version. And now if I go back to Premiere and reopen my shot, you can imagine that all 3 of these have been replaced with the most recent and the most appropriate one. So if we go in here and we play our sequence, we can see the most latest one. The advantage of this system is simply in this: you never leave this editor. You will always be doing your editing and everything on this very Adobe Premiere shot, simply because, or Adobe Premiere sequence basically, simply because every time you have a new updated version of your shot, you basically replace this in here. Once at the very end you had a rendered sequence of your final renders, you basically bring those and you put them in here. But one step at a time, you can constantly change the quality of this and end up seeing a better and better and better version. Like right now at the very beginning, I didn't have any lighting. Now I have the lighting. Right now I don't have any animation. Once I do the first pass of animating, I will bring that first pass of the animating so I can actually see the animated version of my characters, so on and so forth. I can constantly see what's happening with the most recent update of my scenes and the overall animation. Now, the other advantage this system does is this: while one of us in a team of a few people, while one of us is working on the environment and adding more details to it, the other one is actually in Maya and is animating this shot, the shot about the confusing face of the character. Another one of us is on a different shot, is trying to animate this shot wherever the character is approaching the window. And then on top of all of these, whenever one of us gets a chance, they can actually come to Premiere and work on the music or sound effect, or if there are voices or whatever. And we all know that each of us is working on our own little piece of the project, while the overall thing is always coming together and being parts of the same project. And that's basically what they do in every studio on the planet. They break the work as to as many small pieces as they can, so everyone works on one independent small piece of the project, while someone as a project manager or whatever puts everything together and they know how the whole thing is going to look like at the very end. And that is the overall process of doing your 3D animatics, making sure that everything is done in 3D. It helps you with several different very important matters. Above everything, it makes sure that when you are working on your animatics, you have all the timings right, so you know how long each shot is taking. The second one is that when you put them together, somebody can work on the voices and as well as the music and sound effects, so parallel to your efforts in 3D, those things are being taken care of. The other thing that really helps you is that you can constantly update the quality of it without worrying about re-editing or doing anything of the sort. The other thing that helps you is that right off the bat, it gives you a foundation for how your scene should be. You have already fixed your frames per second, the duration of your frame, and most importantly, the dimensions of your scene. You know how big everything has to be. This is the desk, it has to be that big. This is the bed, it has to be that big. I'm gonna have a robot compared to a human character. My robot has to be X size or whatever it is. Whatever you're trying to create, you already have a lot of good references for it. Because of that, it makes your life a lot easier. And then one step at a time, as you keep changing the quality and changing the quality, you keep replacing your shots in your editing software, and you end up with your final version of everything, which is the high quality rendered sequence. So that is the first part of the lesson today, how to make 3D animatics. Any questions up until now? So the next thing you want to talk about is the use of character sets as well as how do we use these. So we have this part taken care of. How do we use character sets to do rotoscoping of animation, or basically how do we do a combination of them to do animation? Let's see what we are trying to do in here. The very first thing is, let's go in here. Doesn't matter, I'm not gonna save this one. I'm gonna say I have this situation here where I have a bunch of joints, right? Doesn't matter how many are there or how complex they are. I just want to show you some processes in here. So this is a bunch of joints in here, just like what we have done before. This is an IK between them. That's just like what we have done before. This is a locator that's going to be the pole vector for my IK. So if I go to rigging and I say skeleton and constraint pole vector. So now here, if I have this, I can actually move around, then I can select my pole vector and I can actually rotate them, right? And remember, we said that we try our best to have as many controllers as we can so that everything becomes easier. So here I'm going to go ahead and say I have the circle, which is the controller up there, and I have another object in here, which is the controller down there. Now we could do it in many different ways and really proper ways, but for now I only care about the controller, so I'm not going to go through those specific areas. I'm just going to parent this one to there and that one to there, which basically means my circle now, the lower circle, controls the bottom of the leg structure, the foot, let's call it. This guy controls the pole vector, and then this guy controls the upper one. Now in a lot of situations, when you actually want to animate your character, the very first thing that you want to do is that you want to block your animation. That means not the most detailed or the fine-tuned settings, rather just the basics of it. Let's say I want to animate this character in a way that at some point the standing is still like this, so it's perfectly straight, let's say something like that one, and then another point is pointing as if the foot is backward like that, and then another one that's the pointing forward, and I want to make sure that all of these things, they work properly. Now if you want to do this animation, it's actually very difficult to select each controller individually. What we do instead is that we make a group of all of these controllers only for the purposes of animation. So this group isn't an actual group in Maya, it's just a group of the animatable objects. How do we do that? We do it like this. I'm going to select this controller and this guy and that guy. So basically everything that I care about animating. Then I go to the control and I go to create character set, which basically says put all of these things together in one selectable entity, right? So I'm going to put them all in here and I'm going to call it, for instance, my character. Let's reset. Let's call it my character, right? What it does is very simple. It basically puts all of them in one object. Here, if you go to your outliner, you can see that there's something called my character, and inside it is everything that we can keyframe. Translation of this circle, rotation of the locator, rotation of the other circle, so on and so forth. This is just an abstract grouping of all the keyable objects. There isn't an actual object in here. It's just a way for us to easily select and what you call keyframe our different objects. So how do we use it? Whenever you have a character, by default it basically gets selected at the bottom of your Maya here. So right now it is selected, called my character, and if it is not selected, if you have multiple one of those, you can just go in here and say select the one that you care about. When a character is selected, then if you press the S button, which is the keyframe, it automatically keyframes your character. So right now, if you look at my time slider, I don't have any keyframes and nothing is selected. But when I press S, it basically makes a keyframe. This keyframe is made on my character. So all of these guys, everything that is on this circle, everything that's on this locator, and everything that's on this last circle, they all now have a keyframe. How do I do that? How do I know that? I'm going to go a little bit further in time. I'm going to push this one to be about here. I'm going to push that one to be about there. I'm going to push that one to be about here. So I don't bother myself with singular keyframing right now. I just worry about blocking. I put my controllers where I care about them. Once I'm happy, I hit S, and it makes another keyframe for everyone in this new position. So if we animate between them, it shows me that the animation is running between the two keyframes. Not for this controller alone, not for the other controller alone, not for the pole vector alone, rather for everything in my scene. So everything is being controlled by this character controller. So the process of it, one more time, it's very, very simple. If I don't have this character controller, and if I don't have any of the individual keyframes anymore, let me delete all of these things, delete this. You just select the objects that you care about. Those objects that you do care about, what you do with them is that you go to control and you say create character set and you give it a name, and that's pretty much it. It basically makes a character set for those controllers. How is this going to help me now? Let's go ahead in here. Let's go and say I have a character. Let's say you have spent a few weeks, you modeled your character, you UV'd and textured and you rigged them and you have all the controllers. And for me, I'm going to get all of those from my content browser. I'm going to say here, there is something in here, isn't there? In the animation, I'm going to say, let's select this gentleman, bring him in. So this is my character. All right, it has all the controls, or at least some basic controls and everything, and it does at least some stuff. All right, not the most perfect one, but it does some stuff. So what I want to be doing is I want to make myself a character set out of these controllers basically. So I'm going to say don't show me the polygons, so I don't need to see the polygons. I also don't need to see the joints. I just want to see my controllers. These are all the controllers that control this character. And if you don't believe me, we could actually try it. I could actually show the polygons back again, select this one, push it back, and that's basically the controller for the index finger of the left hand, for instance, so on and so forth. So each of them basically controls something in here. What it is, I don't know, and that doesn't really matter at this instance, for instance. So here, I'm going to select everyone. All right, let's say this was a character for an actor in our film that is called Alex, for instance. I'm going to go to control. I'm going to say create a character set when I have selected everyone. I'm going to say control, create character set, and here I'm going to call this one Alex character. Right, that's it. That's all I have to do in here. So now there is a new character in here, and we can see it at the bottom of our Maya, lower in the middle lower right corner of Maya, which says Alex character is selected. If I had other characters, I could see their names as well, and whichever I select, that one becomes the currently active one, or the currently active character. So here I'm going to go ahead and say go to the polygons, and now I want to make myself some keyframes. I'm going to come in here, say the character basically does this. All right, this other foot goes back to about there. This hand becomes in here, let's say, tilts a little bit, you know, all right, like that. This other hand comes there, goes there, and maybe goes back, not that much, maybe. All right, and then this one in here. So you see, I don't worry about the individual keyframes. What I do worry about is the posing of the overall shape that I want to give to my character. I worry about that, and then once I'm happy, I hit the S button, and now there is a keyframe in there. I go a little bit further in time, let's say about here. In here, I'm gonna say this foot goes in here. I don't know what this character is trying to do, so you know, this foot comes in here, goes forward, this hand goes back to about there, maybe a little bit more natural, you know, maybe something like this one. This pole vector basically comes and rotates us a little bit, and this arm comes and sits in here. So again, once I'm here, I press the S button, and now there are two keyframes between these two. So I don't need to select individual controllers and keyframe them. I keyframe the entire thing, so I basically block my animation between the most pronounced, you know, keyframes of an entire motion. So this is phase or part A of making a character and making an animation based on rotoscoping an animation. Any questions up until here? The next part of doing any animation is basically twofold. One of them is either you're an animator with years of experience and you understand the process of animation, or you have to actually solely rely on references. Even the most senior animators in the industry, they still rely on a lot of references, simply because that's what helps them understand how the motion should be. Most, senior animators in the industry, they actually have a mirror in front of them in their offices, because they constantly want to see how they would act something, how they would actually do something, and then more importantly, they could see their facial expressions if they're trying to animate the face of a character. So that's the next thing we want to be doing in here. We basically want to get ourselves some reference videos that are going to help us make an animation that basically makes sense. So to do that, I'm actually going to go online, and you can look for all sorts of different references. Here, I'm actually going to go ahead and say walk cycle reference. And then you find a lot of images for them, as well as a lot of videos for them, which really help us understand how the walk should basically happening. This is a walk cycle, reference of a girl that is, walking, and she's, walking from two angles. We can see the side view and the front view. We also can see the number of the frame that, she's currently at. And this really helps us understand, how we should animate. It really helps if we could take this directly into Maya and then animate on top of this. And that's what I'm going to be doing for you right now. So here, what we're going to be doing is this. I'm actually going to go ahead and download this video from YouTube. Remember, for downloading from YouTube, there are many different ways. The simplest one, in my opinion, is this. Whatever link you have for YouTube, at the end of the YouTube part, you put 2 P's. The only problem with this website, which is the youtubemate.com, is that they usually have a lot of very graphic advertising. So I apologize for that. So whatever it is your link, you make it a youtube.pp.com, and everything else stays the way it used to be. So here, I want to download this. I'm going to say YouTube pp, enter. And then here it says, do you want to download this thing? And I'm going to say yes, download it. And it basically downloads the file for me. And now what has happened is that on my desktop, I have this video that has been downloaded as MP4, or I actually think is only MP4 H.264 or whatever format, doesn't matter. So we have actually managed to successfully download our YouTube video. Now, the next thing that is important is that Maya doesn't recognize these formats. Maya actually only understands AVI or MOV uncompressed, which means none of the commercial and mainstream codecs would work in Maya. H.264 or AAC, none of those will work. So you either have to have a video that is like this, AVI or MOV, or the better approach, or the recommended approach from Maya, is having an image sequence. So which basically means convert videos to an image sequence. So you have to take this video and you have to convert it into an image sequence. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to head into Adobe Premiere, which we have been on it for a while today. I'm going to say, let's import this video, whatever it is called. I'm going to say, let's drag it into a sequence in here. Now I want to export this, and I want to export this as an image sequence. So I'm going to say export. In the export setting, I'm going to say it has to go as a JPG or a PNG or a Targa or a TIFF or any of the image formats. I'm going to say JPG because it's the easiest one. And I'm going to put it within the source images of my Maya project. So here, Maya project, source images. Here, I'm going to call this one walk cycle girl. So I know what I'm creating. Save. Actually, I'm going to call it walk cycle as well. So walk cycle. So this is going to be the file. And when we hit export, it takes a little while, but Premiere or any other, editing software or many other utilities out there, they basically convert the video for you into a sequence of images. What does that mean? That means this. I don't need that anymore. What I do need in here is this. In the source images, there is a folder now that's got all of these images. So one image for each frame of the animation. So basically it says as you go along, it basically the girl, it begins walking. So each frame has become a new image, and that's how Maya prefers it. The other thing we can infer from here is that the beginning is frame 0 and then the ending is frame 616. I'm going to remember these two numbers. So I'm going to go back to Maya. This Maya is a brand new scene. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and make ourselves a plane because we want to attach this image, these videos to here. I'm going to say on my plane, I want to have a rendering new Lambert material. My material is going to have a file texture. The file texture is going to be the picture of the girl, any of these, doesn't matter which one. Then I'm going to go ahead and say turn on the use image sequence. So the moment you turn on the image sequence, it basically does this. If you play the animation, it basically plays every frame of it. So one frame will be loaded for each frame of Maya, or one new image will be loaded for each frame of Maya. There are a few issues that we have to fix in here. One issue is that I have to make sure that my sequence is running at 25 frames per second. So I'm going to set this to be 25 FPS. That's the very first thing. The other one is that I remember that my sequence is 616 images, if I'm not wrong. So source images here, the last one is a 616 and the beginning is at 0. So I'm going to go in here and say beginning is 0. The ending is 616. So we go through the entirety of the sequence of this gear moving. And then finally, the image seems a little bit squeezed, as if it's not in the right proportions. And I'm going to have to check that. So when I go here and I get the info for it, it says it is 640 by 360. So those are the numbers I have to stick to. So here I'm going to say 640 or 6.4 by 3.6. So that is the right proportions for this video. The next thing I want to be doing is I actually want to use these references in my front and my side view. So I'm actually going to break this into two pieces. I'm going to go ahead to my modeling, say here, break it in the middle. So basically I have now this side and this side. I'm going to extract one of the sides, so they basically become two pieces, two separate objects. For this object is going to be the front, this object is going to be the side. Now, before I do this, I'm actually going to import my character so I know what size I have to be faithful to. So I'm going to go to General Editors, Content Browser. Let's say this very same character again, import it in here. Because it's a lot easier to, resize my what you call my reference images than it is to actually resize my actual character. So here, these are actually very, very small. So I'm actually going to go ahead and say they become a lot larger. I rotate them like this, so I can actually see them in the front view to decide, how big they should become. Let's put this here. This is still too small. Let's say larger, something like that. So just like the same way that we are actually using references of model sheets, front and side view, to model our characters, now we use references to actually animate our characters. So I'm going to come in here, say this one actually goes further back to about there. All right. So that's there. And then this one should actually tilt to the other direction. So I'm going to rotate it there, which is -90, and obviously we are seeing the back side of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my modeling, I'm going to go to mesh display and say reverse. So basically I see the right side of it. So now this is almost in the right spot. So we can actually see that she comes in here, she begins animation. The last frame was 616. One more time. So she has to be a little bit inside. Perfect. And then that is the side of it. Good. So now we've gotten the references that are going to help us animate our character. The next phase is making the exact same thing that we did last time, which was a character set. So here I'm going to say, don't show polygons, don't show joints. Select all of these controllers, go to rigging. In the rigging, go to control, create character set. and this guy was called Alex apparently. So I'm gonna say create a character set. Great, so now we have the character set in here, and I'm gonna show those. Let's go ahead and say I want to actually start animating this character. I want to go in here, say this is the left foot, which is perhaps about there. This is the right foot. I want to make it like that. Very similar to what I have on the reference. Of course, you will never have a reference that is exactly like the character you're trying to animate. You have to be mindful of that. That would never happen. You have to just, you know, draw inspiration from it. Basically, you have to tell yourself, well, how closely can I make this look like that one? So that's going to be there. That's going to be lower to about there. I'm going to look at it in 3D, make sure even in 3D they make sense, because in this one at least it doesn't. So over there, for instance, that's too much. Same thing with here. All right, I'm going to actually select all of these, just tilt them up a little bit, push them in, so it doesn't feel like, you know, he's standing in such an uptight, you know, position. All right, so something like this one. I think the foot is a little bit too low, so I'm going to push the whole body a little bit higher to about there. It feels like here the shoulders are tilted a little bit to that side. So let's say I'm happy with all of these things, and I'm going to hit the S button. So I make one keyframe for my character. I'm going to go a little bit further in time, say here. All right, so this is where the next position is. So the next position is like this. The foot has gone there, higher, rotated like that. The toes are tilted like this. So I can actually decide about that very easily in here. Very good. So then I'm gonna push this foot forward, rotate it as much as I can, and perfectly straight. Again, I know I cannot perfectly match these two bodies because they have different proportions and different everything, but I can draw proper inspirations from one of them to match the other one too. So that goes there. This is the hand that I have to decide about because I don't know where I have to put it, but obviously this other hand is the one that I can actually push it back to about here. Feels like it's tilted a little bit, feels like all of the fingers are collapsed a little bit further. Let's go to the front view, check it out in the front view. That's too much. Let's go a little bit less, and this hand has to actually come there and about here. All right, I feel like there is a bit of a tilt in here and here. So one step at a time, I block the main keyframes, and every time I hit the S button, so I know what I've done. And now we can see that the animation is beginning to happen. I'm basically keyframing between two positions. And that is basically what we call rotoscoping your animation, which basically allows us to do this. Take an image sequence of reference videos, have a character set, and animate on top of those. So your animation will be based on a reference, obviously not 100%, but very close to it. The good news today is that you have all sorts of references on YouTube and similar places, and on top of that, we all have really high quality cameras with cell phones or webcams or whatever, and because of that you can easily record the animation that you need. If you need a character that jumps, just record yourself jumping and then take that to Maya and animate based on that. If you want a character that kicks, just record yourself kicking and then take that into Maya and do whatever that you need to do. This would very much help you get a very good sense of the space that the character has to occupy, as well as the timing that takes between different keyframes. And that is about it for today.